Hey all, Sai here. So I get asked a lot about my transfer method when I put my verse and logo on the back of my projects. And so I made a video about that, and I am going to make another video because I'm going to add in there my lacquer thinner technique, which I've just been recently using. So one thing I've noticed is the smoother the wood is, the better it transfers. However, wood that isn't as smooth, you can also transfer onto it. You just have to work with it a little bit. I've also noticed that thicker fonts are better than little fancy fonts. So this is my logo, and my size corner font, which I really love, is very small. And I've tried to bold it, and for some reason it doesn't bold. So I tried to look for different fonts, but I just like this one so much, I just use it anyway. But big fonts like this work really well. And color also transfers. And so these are all toner copies. And so inkjet, you have to do that totally differently. There are lots of videos out there showing that technique with ink, but this is with toner, which would be a laser jet printer. So what I'm going to do here is I have some different types of wood. I have juniper, I have a couple different kinds of plywood, and I have a piece of cedar and a piece of pine. And they're all pretty smooth, but you know, they still have their differences in texture. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use the lacquer thinner technique on all of these, and then I'm going to take the best one and the worst one, and I'm going to use the heat transfer technique. So let's try it. So one thing I've learned is to tape it down, because I have tried to hold this and it just doesn't work. So the best thing to do is just to put a piece of tape on there like that. And something else that I tried with this lacquer thinner technique over and over again is I tried to just wet the picture and leave it to see how it transfers, and it doesn't transfer well. It misses pieces. So then I got it real wet and I put weight on it and I left it and checked it, and it still didn't transfer. So I am finding that I am always using something to rub the image. The bad thing about lacquer thinner technique is when you're rubbing the image, it can bleed. And so there's like a fine line between rubbing too hard and rubbing too soft and all that good stuff. So it just takes practice to figure it out. I haven't totally figured it out yet, but I'll show you what I do. So this one is very smooth. I just use a paper towel, it's lacquer thinner. And I just wet it. And I got a little bit of the tape over the top of my image, which is a bummer because that means that probably won't transfer. And I am just going to rub on it some, and it dries really fast. So I'm just going to rub it. I'm not going to rub on size corner very hard, just a little. And see, it's already drying. So then we can take a look at it, and we can add more lacquer thinner to it if we need to. See if I can get it up. There. So, hey, that turned out great, except for where my tape was covering up part of the sun. So we want to make sure that my tape isn't too far down, which it might be on some of those, but take a look at it. It turned out pretty nice. That's on the very smooth piece of juniper wood. Let's go to this bumpy piece of plywood. So I'm going to rub over it. And I've got the sun blocked out again. And then I'm just going to do the same thing. Just go over it real gently, trying to get it not to bleed. And it's almost all dry again already. Love how quickly that dries, especially since it's kind of hot out here. Okay, that turned out pretty good. So the sun There's missing some on the sun there, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more. There's a little bit left on there in my towel. And I'm going to just try it again, going right over the top of it. Let's see. Oh yeah, see, that made it better. Awesome. Notice on this bumpy piece of plywood that the grass is a little bit different color. So it's not real green like in the actual picture. Okay, let's move on to another piece of plywood that's smooth. And put some lacquer on there. Lacquer thinner. Rub it nice and gentle. And it looks like it's bleeding a little bit. I can see through there. Just a little bit of too much lacquer thinner, I think. Oh, and it's already drying again. So nice. Let's take a look. Ooh, that one, where it bled, that one's not so good. But this is a good time to show you another cool thing about this technique is if you don't like it, you can just sand it off. We can do it again. But let's move on to the cedar and the pine. So this is still wet from before, and so that's on the cedar. And I'm do gentle pressure again. I'm just going to keep on applying the pressure until it dries. I didn't do too much on the lettering because it bled on that last one. Okay, it's pretty much dry. Let's take a look. Well, see there? Still, again, some of the sun is missing, some of the grass and the house are missing, even some of the size corner are missing. So I'm just going to add a little bit more liquid to the sun. Yeah! Check that out. That's a lot better. Yay! So I'm going to add a little bit more on the NER and on the house and grass and see if I can get them to look better. Just do little bits at a time here. Yeah. Now let's do a little bit on the NER. Just light pressure there. Hey, that looks pretty awesome. So that's the cedar. Woohoo! Okay, now let's go to the pine. That has that, bumpy surface no matter how smooth it is, type of a thing. Get a little more lacquer thinner on it. And try it out. Push on it. Gently rub it again. Just about dry. Ooh. Okay, that didn't turn out very well at all. I'm going to try to make it a little bit better. I'm not sure if it will or not. And did you see the funny color of the green again? So weird. I'm gonna push a little harder because ooh, and now it's bleeding. It's bleeding! It's bloody! It's bloody! Ooh, okay. So that's how that looks now. The green looks more green, but it looks pretty bad. Okay, so the best ones were, I say, the juniper. Even though I cut it off, it transferred real nice and crisp. And then the pine was the worst. So let's try those now with the heat transfer and see if we can make those look better with the heat, which I think we can. So I've discovered that different types of wood take different amounts of heat. Some don't need very much heat and some need a lot more. And I haven't done much transfer with juniper, so I'm not sure how much it needs, but so I'm going to just try it out here. And I always burn off some of the heat. I learned that from my friend Brian Gidney at Summers Woodworking. He taught me to burn it off a little bit. So thanks, Brian. And so it's burned off some, and let's try it now. So what I do is I just go right over everything. And as it's transferring, the toner is getting hot and transfer. I guess, I don't know what's going on, but I notice that it gets sticky. See that? It'll stick. So you have to make sure that you pull that up when it's still warm so the paper doesn't stick. Then you have to clean off the paper, which is just another step and kind of a pain. And I just go over just little bits at a time. Well, I went over the whole part, but I just make sure that the parts are coming off that I want, which is awesome. And there, do a little more on the grass. Cool. And down there. So I know there's a little piece missing there, little piece missing there, a little bit on the house missing, right there, there, there. Okay, let's take a look. So we can see a little bit of the paper that got stuck on there because it just got stuck, but that can wash off with a little bit of water and gentle rubbing with your fingernail. But look how nice that is. And something else too is I got some of the heat, like I did here where I burned off the heat. You can see that I got a little bit too hot on the paper and it showed a little bit right there. And so that's a learning curve and stuff so that you don't have those burn marks. But I definitely think this one's better. Working with the lacquer thinner might make it just as good as this if I practice a little bit more. So this one I'm excited about because we have all the bumps in the pine. So I'm gonna burn off some of the heat on the pine here, and pine doesn't take much heat at all, I've noticed. I know this is long and boring, but I wanted to keep it in real time as much as possible to show how long it takes to do these transfers. There's a few things I want to mention. I don't change the temperature of my wood burner even though it has a dial. I just burn off that extra heat first. The tip I use is one I modified. It was a flat beaver tail sort of tip that I bent to form a curved wide area, and it works well for me. There are tips made for transferring. They are wide and thick, but too flat for me, but they may work for you. Also, you'll need to horizontally flip your image if it has lettering or if you don't want it to be backwards, but sometimes it doesn't matter. I do this for about another minute, so if you want to jump ahead to 15:30, that's when I'm finished with this part. Do the grass. Alrighty, so it still didn't turn out as good as the juniper did, but it definitely looks better than the lacquer thinner. Yeah. So that's how I do my transfer techniques. And if you can master it where you can put it down and put something heavy on it without ever having to rub the lacquer thinner, then cool. I just can't get it to work. But these little frosting spreaders work great. I know some people have told me about little rollers that you can get, which I haven't gotten one of those to try that yet. So those are the techniques that I use. And what I'm finding is if I try the lacquer thinner and it doesn't work out so well, then I just sand it off and I use the heat. Because the heat's a little more labor intensive, but it seems to work on just about all kinds of wood. And so the lacquer thinner, I'm learning, doesn't always work on all of them. It doesn't get a real crisp image, but it still works on some stuff. So I hope that helps everyone, and we will see you next time.